Hi everyone! As we move into week 2, you are going to start reading some ethnographies. And I know we haven't started talking about methods yet, but I wanted to go ahead and have you start reading some ethnographies because they are really important to what we do as anthropologists. And so with this video, I wanted to kind of introduce the idea of what an ethnography is really briefly, and then transition a little bit into what your ethnography assignment is, so you can start thinking about that as you read these first couple ethnographies. So, week 2 is all about culture, and that's what an ethnography is all about. An ethnography is just a way of describing a culture. An ethnography is telling you all about the culture of a society. And so, with your ethnography assignment, you're going to do an ethnographic description. You are going to go and you are going to spend time with a culture, right? With a... So we are moving into, I guess we are in the middle of week 2 right now. And week 2 is all about culture. So in week 1, we talked about what anthropology is. And now week 2, we're going to really start digging a bit deeper into what culture is, because this class is all about cultural anthropology. So, week 1, what is anthropology? Week 2, what is culture? Then we'll put it all together, and we'll start talking about specific aspects of what cultural anthropology is. And so, as we move through week 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to have you reading ethnographies. And so with this video, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what an ethnography is, and use that as a transition to tell you about and start talking about what your ethnography assignment is. So we'll start with what an ethnography is, we'll talk about what your ethnography assignment is, and then a little tiny bit about what this first ethnography is, which is attached below, and I have also added to your week 2 content page as required reading for week 2, and kind of blending into week 3 a little bit since I put it up a little late for you this week. So an ethnography or ethnography is the study of human society, human culture. And that sounds a lot like anthropology, but ethnography is this specific systematic study of culture from the perspective of the culture being studied. And so in cultural anthropology, it's a specific method, a specific way of talking about and describing culture. It's a written method. When we talk about reading ethnographies, we often are talking about reading very long, kind of descriptive written works about cultures. And so the first one you'll read this week is relatively short. A lot of times when people are talking about reading ethnographies, or whenever you're being assigned an ethnography in a class, a lot of times that's a full book. Mostly the ethnographies I read as an undergraduate were full textbook style books. They weren't quite like 1,000 pages like your textbook is, but they were quite long, really extensive, really in-depth descriptions of a culture. So really almost everything you would want to know about that culture, from the day-to-day activities to the kinship relationships, the history, everything we'll talk about in this course, all of these different sections, pretty much all of that information is covered in an ethnography. Now what you all will do is much simpler, right? I'm not asking you to find a culture and tell me literally everything about that culture. What I'm asking you all to do is to practice the ethnographic method, to practice this highly descriptive method. And so you'll see below I've attached a document called Ethnography Assignment Description. That is exactly what it sounds like. It's a description of this assignment. It's relatively detailed, much more detailed than anything I ever received when I was doing this type of assignment as a student. Really the purpose of this assignment is to have you experience and try out these methods. That's really what it is. I want you to practice and see what it might be like to try or do an anthropological method. So this is just one method. It's kind of the hallmark of anthropology, as you'll see when we get to our week on methods. I know we're not there yet, and so this might seem a little early, and some of this language and some of the things that you'll read in this document or hear me say in this video will make a little bit more sense as we work through that chapter and that section on methods. But I want to go ahead and introduce those ideas here because they are important to this assignment. And so really the purpose here is just to have you experience and practice at least one anthropological method. The assignment is due on October 15th by midnight, or 11:59 p.m. on October 15th. That's the Sunday of that week. So you have a little bit of time to be working on this project. It is a multi-step project, so I'm giving it to you right now at the beginning of the semester so you have some time to work through these different steps. So the first step is that I want you to start thinking about a culture or a subculture or a group of people that you have access to, but you aren't a part of that group right now. So if you are a practicing Christian, you wouldn't say, well, I would like to do my ethnography on my church. You are already a member of that group, so that wouldn't make a very good study group because you already know that culture, you're already a part of it. Now, if you're a practicing Christian, you might say, I would like to study the synagogue down the street. That would be a group that you aren't a part of, right? So you could study that group. I use the word group because you probably won't have access to a discrete culture or subculture necessarily. So we're going to kind of substitute this idea of a group and use that in place of a discrete culture because we likely won't have access to a completely discrete culture or subculture, just by the way of how our society is set up. If you happen to have access to a discrete culture or subculture, awesome. Run that idea by me and we can totally chat about that because that would be fantastic. So anyway, identify a group of people or an organization or something like that that you are not a part of, that you think would be interesting to study. That's step one. That's really it. Step two then is to do some preliminary research. You are only required to have two sources. The first source would be a primary source. This is going to be something published or put out, written, or produced by the organization or group that you're studying. So let's stick with the church example as I do in the document that you'll read here below. You would go to their website, or it could be specific to the actual physical church you're going to, or it could be the religion as a whole, but something produced by that organization. You would read about them there, take notes, gather a lot of that information, right? Then you're also going to go to something produced by a member or a group outside of that culture or subculture. I would like you to try to find something in support of or shedding a positive light on that group, and then something kind of being a little more critical, right? Try to get two different perspectives. Think about the bias of those organizations, of those different writings, okay? After you've done this preliminary research, like I said, only required to have two sources. The best papers will go above and beyond, and they'll have more sources than that, more perspectives. The more the better, right? Try to get a really holistic, big picture, right? Once you've done that, you're going to write a paper, short. So you're going to have about 3 to 4 pages double-spaced, following Chicago format, remember? So you're going to write about that culture from that purely outside perspective. Now you haven't done any observation, just outside perspective. Once you do that, then you're going to go and you're going to participate in that culture for a total of 4 hours. I'd like you to split that up a little bit, but you're going to go and you're going to participate in that culture. Then you're going to write up a description of what you saw while you were in that culture. Okay? This will be totally from that insider, that emic perspective. And then once you've done both of those steps, you're going to reflect on the entire process. What was it like? Was it difficult? Was it awkward? Was it uncomfortable? Did you feel really strange? Like you were intruding in someone else's environment? Were people disrespectful to you? Were they very welcoming? What was that like? What was that experience like? If you were going to do it again, how would you do it differently? What did you learn? Did you learn about yourself? So really a personal reflection there at the end, and that's going to be just a couple of pages. So again, there's a lot more information in that document, but just giving you kind of a starting place here with the video. Okay, you have, again, a first kind of ethnography I want you to read. Go ahead and try to work your way through that this week. It is required reading for this week, but again, I did kind of upload that a little late for you all, so you don't necessarily have to read it to successfully participate in discussion this week or things like that. I do want you to make sure you read that. It will provide a really good foundation. I'll also link to kind of an open discussion board where you all can discuss that. So read through that, get a kind of an idea of what an ethnography is. And then we're going to keep reading some more ethnographies as we move through the next couple of weeks. And it'll kind of give you a good feel of what we're talking about when we talk about ethnography. And then we'll talk about some more specific methods, some other methods we do, and we'll talk about ethnography in more detail when we get to the methods week. But just to kind of get you thinking about this ethnography project a little bit, and I think that's all I have for you right now. That's a little bit long of a video, so if you stuck it out all the way through, thanks so much. And we'll touch base probably the end of this week, maybe the beginning of next week, with a week 1, week 2 kind of wrap up. I like to do them together because they're very similar and they work well together. So we'll do a little week 1, week 2 wrap up end of this week, beginning of next week, before we really jump into the heavier content weeks here. But if you've made it all the way through, thanks so much, and I'll talk to you all soon. Great work so far, and in the first week and partway through week 2, and I can't wait to see what you all kind of produce the rest of the semester. So great work so far. I'll talk to you soon.